This afternoon, I am excited and delighted to have an amazing guest with me. Dr. DeForest B. Soaries Jr. is the creator of DFree, a financial freedom movement that includes a strategy that addresses the cultural, psychological, and spiritual influences on financial wellness.
Right.
Dr. Soaries is the author of Say Yes to No Debt, 12 Steps to Financial Freedom, and DFree Lifestyle, 12 Steps to Financial Freedom. Dr. Soaries serves as the senior pastor of First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens in Somerset, New Jersey, and he is an independent director at 3 public corporations. He's the former Secretary of State also for New Jersey and chairman of the United States Election Assistance Commission. I am so delighted to have us joining me this afternoon to talk about financial empowerment. Good afternoon, Dr. Soaries.
Well, Dr. Simmons, thank you so much. You make me tired just listening to you talk about me, but I am thrilled to be with you. I just saw you Saturday.
Exactly.
And you'd be interested in knowing I am speaking to you live from the office of that prolific gospel artist and Bishop Hezekiah Walker.
All right. Well, you are always on the go doing 3 things at once. So I just appreciate your taking the time to join me this afternoon. So let's just get right to some questions. Just get right to some questions.
Sure.
Why did you begin concentrating on economic empowerment in your church and the church generally? What galvanized you to do that?
Well, you know, Dr. Simmons, I am a child of the 60s, and I grew up in the age of protest where we would use all kinds of strategies to bring attention to injustice. I was trained by Jesse Jackson. I worked for Jesse Jackson for 3 years in Operation Push, and I really enjoyed being alive and being a participant at that time in history. And I've watched the changes that have happened. I have benefited from the changes that have happened. And the social climate of this country today, while it's not perfect, it certainly is a stark difference between today and 50 years ago. Okay. I then evolved into other activities like voter registration and political campaigns. I served in government. And by the time I came to First Baptist in Somerset as pastor, it was clear to me that as a people, we had achieved great outcomes in terms of social rights, political rights. We had, of course, begun electing African Americans to high offices all across the country. But what we lacked was a real strategy for economic empowerment and economic improvement. And it was evidenced not only everywhere I go, but right there in my own congregation. There is a good chunk of our community that has been poor and that will be poor unless something changes. And I felt that as a strategist and activist, I wanted to spend the rest of my life really focusing not only on the spiritual, which is my primary job, but also the economic strategy. We have slogans, we have sentiments, we have hashtags, but we lack strategy.
That's right.
And that's what brought me to that conclusion as pastor of this church.
Okay. So mentioning strategies. What are your perspectives or solutions for churches in the area of economic empowerment or finance? Give me some of your main strategies and solutions for churches.
Yeah, my main strategy emanates from Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7. That is that the borrower is slave to the lender. It took, Dr. Simmons, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but it took probably 30 years of ministry before I ever even used that verse in a sermon. I had been trained and I had been focused on racial injustice, beginning with and epitomized by slavery of Africans. I had never seen debt as slavery, even though it's in the Bible. I'd never understood the shackles of debt being synonymous with the shackles of slavery. And so I began at First Baptist, and where my teaching begins, where my strategy begins, is helping people avoid debt. Now, debt. I'm talking about the kind of debt that I was suffering from, where I was. I bought a brand new Cadillac on credit when I became a preacher, even though I had been driving. I paid for a Chevy because I felt that preachers were supposed to drive Cadillacs.
Right.
And so that was a mentality, and I had to change my mentality before I could change my financial outcomes. And so, we start with helping people understand that debt is a crippler, that debt really flows from a spiritual problem. I mean, the reality is much of what we borrow to buy, we're just too impatient to wait until we have the cash. And we pay high interest rates.
Right.
Thinking about that, you mentioned that I'm on the board of 3 public companies. One of them pays a pretty decent dividend every quarter, but it's equal to 7-8%. If I'm paying 18% interest on a credit card, an 8% dividend, that doesn't really help me develop wealth.
Right.
The road to wealth does not begin with investing in big ticket items. It begins by living debt-free, having emergency savings, having discretionary income, and that is what I had to learn. So we start with that. Now to get there, Dr. Simmons, what I had to learn was that I didn't have to wait until I had more money.
Okay.
Many of us really believe that the solution to our financial problems is having more money.
Right.
And because if that were the case, then the majority of the professional basketball or football players wouldn't file bankruptcy within 3 years of retirement.
That's right.
I had to change the way I was spending my money. I was paying for furniture and nice clothes, and I was buying expensive neckties to look good on the outside without having a savings account. So the second thing is to show people not only that we should be out of debt, but to teach people how we can get out of debt. If you're paying for 800 TV stations on premium cable, you're probably only watching 4 or 5, and you can downgrade your cable subscription, take what you save, and pay off debt.
Right.
If you get your car washed at a car wash, I tell the young people at the church all the time, the water at the car wash is not wetter than the water at your house. Wash your own car and take that money and pay down your student loans. So first is get out of debt. Second is we teach people how to get out of debt. And then thirdly, we help people identify options once they have discretionary income, once they've paid off their car. We had 2 women yesterday in church testify that they had paid off their cars, but they still drive their cars. So the $200 to $300 a month that they were using to pay off their car, they now can use to buy insurance, to set up a savings program, to donate money to a Black college. So that's basically what D-Free stands for. And I know it's not like sexy, it's not dramatic, it's not going to put me on the front page of the New York Times, but person by person, we get testimonies that lives are being changed because people are taking control of the money they have.
Your message has gone around the country and helped so many people who were not looking for a silver bullet, but they were looking for ways that they could be responsible over their own money. And that's why I wanted you to do this broadcast today, because I think in the church, too often, we're looking for something big, something grand, some silver bullet that God's going to just drop something out of the sky, instead of saying, here are the steps, follow the steps. They actually work. So when I think about that, why would you say economic empowerment or financial stability institutionally and personally is critical to the future of the Black church? Why is it important, really?
Well, it's critical because in the first instance, Black churches depend completely on the financial support of Black people.
Right.
And if our people are paying last month's bills with next week's check, if our people are having a negative net worth at the rate of 35%,
right.
If our middle income earners are living paycheck to paycheck, that is going to have a devastating impact on Black churches. So from a survival perspective, our churches should embrace strategies, not just mine, but every church should have a strategy to help our people financially. The second is, it reverts back to a previous statement you made. Jesus was concerned about the practical needs of people. He fed them when they were hungry. He admonished us to clothe people while they were naked. And I don't think there's any greater social concern today than the economic plight of Black people. Now, we know how we got here. We know racism is our history. We know we've been denied. We know our neighborhoods have been redlined. We know we were denied FHA loans. We know how we got here.
Right.
But knowing how you got where you are does not satisfy your need to know how to get where you're going. So I think we spend a lot of time describing our analysis of the past, and then we stop short of offering people strategies for the future. So the Black church, for survival purposes, the Black church for biblical purposes, Jesus said in Luke 4:18 that the Spirit of the Lord was upon him to preach good news to the poor and set captives free. Right. Well, good news for poor people is how not to be poor.
That's right.
And good news for captives, freedom for captives, is freedom from economic bondage. I am not afraid of being successfully contradicted. We must, as a people, as a church, as a community, address our financial needs and offer financial strategies.
Okay. So when you talk about, I'm seeing, and you've seen it too, we're seeing so many churches that are building large buildings and doing all of those kinds of things and increasing the debt for churches. Have you addressed that as you've gone around the country too, talking about being debt free?
I really have. And it's a serious problem, Dr. Simmons. I got a call recently from a significant church in the South that's in bankruptcy and foreclosure.
Yeah.
If you spend more than you bring in,
that's right,
you have a problem, whether you're an individual, family, or church.
Right.
And I've been begging pastors to take this seriously. I have a little pamphlet that I give pastors. I'll send you a copy. It's really the institutional implications of D-Free. In other words, what I'm trying to ask pastors to do is not only teach their members how to live a biblically, financially responsible lifestyle, but then have the church do the same thing.
That's right.
That our church operates on 90% of our income. We give away hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we have a bank account. I mean, I can't teach people to do something that the pastor doesn't do and that the institution does not do. Right. And believe it or not, we don't like to talk about it, but we have to. The Black churches around America are in desperate trouble. The majority.
That's right.
Our churches are not healthy.
They are not.
The majority. Our conventions are not healthy.
That's right.
And we gather in hotels and convention centers all across the country talking about nothing, celebrating our survival.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's one of the reasons I do this broadcast.
Yeah.
Is because I go around the country and I see these unhealthy tendencies that we keep perpetuating.
We really do.
Our people are broke. Our churches are broke. Our denominations are broke. Our schools are broke.
Schools are broke. The average HBCU is on the brink of bankruptcy.
Exactly.
There are only about a dozen Black colleges that are really financially viable.
Right. Right. And I'm just convinced as you are, that it doesn't have to be this way.
No, it doesn't.
It just doesn't have to be this way. And I think we need people like you and those who are spreading the same message to say we need to put aside numerous other things and look at our financial health and well-being and that of our people. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I absolutely agree. And you'll be encouraged and inspired to know that the National Baptist Convention of America, which is the smaller Baptist convention led by Reverend Dr. Samuel Talbert, has embraced D-Free as a convention.
Okay.
We've trained hundreds of their pastors, and they are taking it very, very seriously. But I'll tell you this, the Delta Sigma Theta sorority has embraced D-Free as a national program. Over almost 200 of their chapters have joined our $1 Billion Challenge, which I'll talk to you about. And I believe that Black America is about to change in a significant way because of the leadership of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority.
That's an amazing sorority. Tell me about that $2 billion challenge.
No, it's interesting. And so, you know, I believe that we should have measurable outcomes no matter what we do.
Right.
And, you know, the strength of the civil rights movement was that all of the protest was aimed at very specific outcomes. I mean, the March on Washington was not just a display of passion, but there were specific legislative outcomes that Roy Wilkins, Babe Rustin, Dr. King, and others were aiming at. One of our challenges since the civil rights era is that other than electing people to office, we haven't had measurable outcomes that we could aim at and work towards. And so I didn't want our financial ministry, I didn't want this D-Free movement simply to be selling books and giving speeches.
Right.
And so I prayed about it, and a young fella gave me an idea, and he said, why don't you set a goal of having people pay off a certain amount of debt?
Right.
And when I looked at it, I said, well, the average Black family has at least $10,000 in debt. And if we go around the country the way it looks like we're going to, we can get 100,000 people to pay off $10,000 of debt, which will create $1 billion outcome.
Right.
And if we shift $1 billion in debt payments to $1 billion in real estate, savings, and insurance, you can increase $1 billion by 10, 15 fold. So the $1 billion challenge is my challenge to Black America to pay off $1 billion in debt by the end of 2020. Now the question is, how do you measure that?
Right.
So I raised some funds and put in some funds myself. We created a website called the $1 Billion Paydown. And on that website, you can go in there, set up your own account. You give us no information, no personal information. You simply use it as a tool to list all of your debt. Listen, I had a very popular movie star that I can't name call me for advice. And I asked the person how much debt they had. They didn't even know. I mean, what happens is, Dr. Simmons, what happens to me is if you don't have a lot of money, but you have a lot of debt, you don't even count how much debt you have because you know you can't pay it off. Right. So the $1 Billion Challenge has a website called $1BillionPaydown.com. You go in, you sign up, you give yourself an ID and a password, and then you just use the website to list all of your debt. Then you set a goal on when you'd like to pay off each one of them. And the website will tell you how much money you have to pay, how often you have to pay it. And then you can form a group. So the Deltas, for instance, have about 180 chapters that have signed up as chapters, and they literally compete with each other on who can pay off the most debt. So it's a real movement. You don't have to march anywhere. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to buy anything. But what we're trying to do is make getting out of debt as popular as going shopping with your friends and marching and protesting against injustice.
So it's $1 billion debt
The website is $1 billion paydown.com.
$1 billion paydown.com.
Yeah.
So every preacher who looks, every layperson who watches this broadcast, every minister of music, every scholar, because these broadcasts hit thousands and thousands of people, and then they're shared. So it's $1 billion paydown.com. People can go on. No one's using your personal information. The personal information is for you.
Right.
And this tool tells you how. I had already heard about the tool.
You sound like you know all about it.
And it's an amazing tool, and it works. And so if you are a senior pastor, if you're a leader in ministry, you can have your people go on and do this. One of the questions, I do teasers about each upcoming broadcast. And one of the things that I said was, why is it that so many clergy do not assist their members with economic empowerment? And the main reason is because the clergy often don't know how themselves. But true. I want to say to every clergy out there, every ministry leader, I want to challenge you to use this website to help your people. You don't have to know everything, but this you can simply use. It's an answer. And Dr. Soaries has proven over decades that his formulas, his approaches to economic empowerment work. They work. So no, you don't have to have all of the answers to everything, pastors and ministry leaders, but you need to direct your people to this website so that they can get help. It is 2019. We cannot have pastors who simply preach every Sunday, teach every week, while their people fall further into poverty and churches go into more debt. That just cannot continue. Dr. Soaries.
Amen. Can I just say amen?
Go ahead.
that was a great message. I was going to take that clip and use it with your permission.
Please do. Please.
No, but it's so. And let me tell you something else that we do, and we'll do it for you. We send, like the Deltas. We send Delta Sigma Theta chapter presidents information on how much debt their members are paying off. So if anybody who has a group, any pastor that does what you say, we will send that pastor information so that he can see. He won't see the names, but he'll see the numbers. He'll know that his leadership and ministry is having a real economic impact, because I'm telling you, the first year we did this, Dr. Simmons, now I don't say this to everybody, but the first year we did this at First Baptist, where we really focused on helping our people get control of their spending and their debt, the offerings in the church went up by $1 million.
My goodness.
And we didn't ask for any extra money.
Right.
But when you help people free up the money and think about the money, not only are they willing to give, but they are grateful to God for the church caring about their finances and not just wanting to get into their pocketbooks.
All right. All right. Well, that's why I'm so excited about this, because it does work. And pastors and ministry leaders, you heard the offer. If you will get your church signed up, Dr. Soaries and his team will then let you know, as a ministry leader, the amount of debt that your people are in, number one, and number two, how they are coming out of the debt, how they're coming out of it. And churches need more than this. They need more of this than they need screens in their churches. They need more of this than they need to attend the next Hampton Ministers Conference or other conferences. We need to help our people get out of debt.
You know, I laugh when you said screens, because when we built our new church, a fella came in to show us the screens. And on the right, we do it, the right and the left side of the pulpit. So I
Right.
said to the guy, I said, well, let me just ask you this. What color are these screens? He said, well, the screens are white. And I said, how large? He told me. And I said, well, what shape are they? He said, well, they're flat screens. I said, I'm going to pay you $70,000 to put a flat white screen in front of a white flat wall. I said, I don't need screens. So I just project on the wall. I just and people think they're screens. People call them screens because
Yep.
they look exactly like the wall. So why would I pay money for screens when I have a wall? But it's just so interesting how we do things just because other people do them or because it's the thing to do. And I'm just not into spending money just because I have it.
Yeah. And we do things also because we see everyone doing them and we don't want to be left behind.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we're missing some major trend and we're just going into debt. That's what we're really doing. We're going into debt. I'm looking at all of the ways that churches are now allowing their people to give. And I know that churches did not sit down and say, how much is this one taking from us for us to get the money? But we're just following trends. So I'm glad that you shared that examples. Dr. Soaries, I know that you are busy. Are you mentoring others to carry this legacy of economic empowerment forward?
Yes, I am. Thanks for asking that. I was beginning to feel guilty because so many individual pastors, many of them younger, had begun asking me to be their mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I had wonderful mentors, Sam Proctor being the major mentor in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I found myself saying, yes, I'll mentor you. But then I also found myself not making time to mentor.
Right.
And so what I did, well, a couple of years ago, I actually formalized my response, and now I have a mentoring group,
Great.
and I spend time with them on a scheduled basis. We get together 2 or 3 times a year. We do webinars, we do conference calls. When major issues come up in the country and they like my perspective, you know, I'll call an emergency meeting. I'm expanding it now. I'm going to lead a D-Men group at Payne Theological Seminary starting August. So the answer is yes. I am nearing the end of my full-time pastoral career, and I plan to do much more writing, much more teaching, and much more mentoring the way my mentor Sam Proctor did.
Okay, now you just put that out there for everyone to hear. You're nearing the end of your career as a senior pastor.
Right.
You want to give us a time frame and then tell us what's next. What are you doing next?
No, but I was elected pastor of this church in 1990, and next year becomes my 30th year, and I think 30 years is a good run. We've done a lot of good ministry. I thank God for that time, but we are in church-wide succession planning mode now.
Okay.
We haven't made any specific dates, but many of us for the last 30 years have worked together. We want to make sure we make room for young leadership, not just the pastor, but the deacons and the trustees and the ushers in the school, while we're still healthy and around to pass the baton, but hold on to it together for a while. So it's a phase. It's not going to be an event. It's going to be a process. And I'm phasing into more writing. I have a new book coming out next Monday.
Tell us about it.
Oh, it is such an exciting book, Dr. Simmons. I'll send you a copy. It's called Say Yes When Life Says No.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And I started on this journey of studying John chapter 15, where Jesus heals the man who was born blind, when I was diagnosed with cancer in 2010. And I went to John 15 to be reminded of how Jesus is a healer. And I ended up in John 15 being shown by God, not what Jesus did for the blind man, but what the blind man did to position himself to be blessed by Jesus.
Okay.
So I wrote the whole book on John chapter 15, based on the lessons I learned from the blind man himself. So when you look at it, you'll see that life through the lens of the blind man can offer you a series of no's. The first no was he couldn't see. So the whole chapter, the first chapter is about what to do when you can't see. You can't see yourself getting a better job. You can't see yourself ever getting healthier. And how this blind man motivated me, because although he was blind, he didn't lock himself at home and just drown in self-pity. He got up, he got dressed, and he went out. And had he not done that, he wouldn't have seen Jesus.
All right. All right.
So the book, and then there's a workbook attached to it. And the workbook gives you a 31-day strategy for restructuring your life, your priorities, your relationships, and measuring your outcomes.
Say that one more time.
Yeah, it gives you a 31-day strategy for restructuring your life, your relationships, your finances, your priorities, and having measurable outcomes.
Okay, and give us the title again.
Say yes when life says no.
And it'll be on Amazon on Monday?
It's on Amazon today, but they won't send it to you until Monday.
I know how that works.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's some of my best work. I'll give you another example. In the book, I talk about what happens when you have unexpected success. I mean, listen, the guy blind all of his life. He had no plans on seeing Jesus.
Right.
By dinner time, he can see. Well, he now has a whole set of decisions to make because he can't act like he's still blind.
Right.
He's got to act like he can see. He can't sit on the corner and beg. He's got to form relationships. And sometimes I find out, Simmons, some people, when they experience success, they blow it because they're not ready for it.
My goodness.
There's a whole chapter on say yes to unexpected results. It's just
I think that's very timely for all Christians and certainly people who do ministry.
It's a great book. It took me almost 8 years to write. And it didn't start out as a book. It started out again with God using the scripture to impact me. And then, of course, me using that impact to bless my congregation. And then it turned into a Bible study and then to the book.
My goodness. Well, we're excited to hear about that. And we're glad that this is one more tool that people watching this broadcast can use. Dr. Soaries, do you still go do you still go to churches? Or are you basically going to visit groups now to talk about debt and an economic empowerment? Can people still call the church and say,
yes,
we want Dr. Soaries to come? Do you still do that for individual churches or mainly for groups now?
Most of my time is spent in the church community with groups of churches. The Virginia Baptist Convention just called, the National Baptist Convention. Every now and then I'm able to sneak into a town, and then while I'm there, stay over and help a church. I'll probably do 3 or 4 individual churches before the year's out. But it's the best use of my time. Is for a group of churches to gather, either denominationally or geographically. I'm not looking for places to preach. I'm looking for places to make an impact.
Exactly. This man has a mega church. So you all need to be clear on that. He has a mega church, but your church, if your church is in debt, your members are in debt, you as a pastor, as a ministry leader, deacon, trustee, usher, if you want to empower your community, ask 10, 15, 20 churches to come together. And that way you all can properly pay him.
I don't charge a fee.
Oh my goodness. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I don't charge.
He does not charge a fee. So if you all get him there and get him the right accommodations, he does not charge a fee. He does not charge a fee. Now, I knew that, but I wanted you all to hear him say that. This is why I invited this man. He's been doing this for years, not to help himself, but to help us. And brothers and sisters, as he shifts to the sunset years of doing pastoral ministry, I want you to make sure that instead of just holding more sessions to talk about nothing and to rant and rave, that you make the commitment to help your community. Yeah. So, as I said, after this broadcast, 10, 15, 20 of you, you can do it regionally, you can do it denominationally, just do it. Get together and get this economic empowerment information. That's the end of our broadcast. I want to thank each of you for joining us today, Dr. Soaries. I can't tell you how delighted I am that you were able to join me today. Want to say to each of you out there, as I always say, share the video. It doesn't cost you anything to help some other brother or sister in Christ. Share the video. And then as we get to July, I've got great guests also coming. We're going to talk about preaching again. We're going to go back to seminary education part 2. Good. Taking me a minute to get the guest that I know you all really want to hear, but we're doing that. And so many other things are coming up in July. Share the video, talk about the broadcast. Again, this is Dr. Martha Simmons, and thank you for joining me for this session of Preaching and Preachers on Facebook Live. Have a great week, everyone.
God bless you. Thank you for having me.